And here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you happen to be hiding out. I happen to be in a double secret location on double secret probation. Welcome, one and all, to Coffee Talk. It is time once again for Coffee Talk Live. And if you are listening to us somewhere else and you'd like to join the live portion, you can find us Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Coffee Talk at Prepper University. That is at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University on YouTube. You can also find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Coffee Talk Chat. If you are on Twitter and you would like to just jump in there, I can put stuff up on X that I can't put anywhere else because I'll get in a lot of trouble. Today, of course, as always, we will be talking about some of what is going on in the news today, some of what's going on in the world today, and having a little bit of discussion on the subject. And I do read through as many of the comments as is reasonable to help those of you who are listening and not able to see keep up. And of course, I'm being joined by felines. I've got Miss Kitty actually sleeping in the chair behind me today. That's Miss Kitty. And Granny Smith is in the room, but you can't see Granny Smith right now. She's sitting in the corner. Now go ahead and acknowledge some of the people that have chimed in so far. See, Helter is here. Dragon is here. Monkey. Shane, he says 2 days in a row. Yeah, absolutely. Donna is here, says remember thumbs up, like, and share. And Dilo says basically the same thing, thumbs up. Yes, if you can provide a thumbs up or what stars or whatever the hell you got, I'll take it. Sven is here from occupied Michigan. Fluke Man is here, as well as Sean says he's here from Northern Illinois. As we get ready to jump off, and of course, you know, the big thing that you're going to talk about because you just can't help it, and one more, I see Tuck has just jumped in, is the debate last night. Well, first there was the UN summit? Was it the UN summit that he was at? He was at some summit. And then the NATO summit. That's where he was. The NATO summit, and then he was in that, not the debate, he was in a news conference. Now I'm doing it. I'm pulling a Biden. And Brian is here. He says he found me. Yep, here I am. So Biden is at the NATO summit. And he flubs, and they've been tearing him apart for it. He flubs and he calls Zelensky Putin by accident. He introduces him as President Putin. That was great. Because actually, he took it in stride. You can see Vladimir Voldemort Zelensky laughing because it is a joke. It is a joke. It really is. At least he caught it right away. Although someone might have told him in his earpiece, hey, it's Zelensky, not Putin. Although when he did the press conference last night and he accidentally called Donald Trump the vice president, he did not catch it. He kept going. And, you know, takeaways from the press conference, because they're picking it apart. And there are a lot of Biden apologists who sit there and say, it's no big deal. So he misspoke. He misspoke a few times. He's been doing that for a long time. That's true. It is true. It's not a big deal that he necessarily misspoke. Hell, I do it. As long as you catch it or you're mindful of it. He's not always mindful of it. And more importantly, he gets worse as he goes on. It gets worse because of the physical and cognitive decline that he is enduring. It continues to get worse. And, you know, the takeaway I have from it, I did watch enough of it. I didn't watch the whole thing. I'm not going to sit there for 90 minutes plus. I watched some of it. Excuse me, the press conference didn't go too badly. It really didn't. Keeping in mind, it was staged. You know, the whole thing was prearranged. It was set up. It was set up for him to stand up there for that length of time and do that press conference without really blowing it, so that he doesn't look as badly as he did previously. And he did what he always does. Flubs aside, he was misleading about his role in the presidency, talking about how it's because of him now that the border is starting to become under control. I guess he assumes we've all forgotten he's the one that created the problem in the border in the first place. He did that. He went on and on about how gas prices are down and food prices are down, and he talked about how it's putting pressure on corporate America to stop gouging people. That's not what started this. That's not the root of the problem. He basically was misleading about things in his speeches and in his answering of questions, which is what he's always done. He patted himself on the back for being such a great guy and doing such a great job, which is what he's always done. He always brags. He says he'll say something like not to brag, but, and then he'll go on and on about how great he is. We've heard it all. At least he didn't go down the bunny trail with too many personal stories, talking about family members getting eaten by cannibals and stuff. Sven says Americans bled for this country so that they could put this dog emperor in. Yeah. And Dragon says Zelensky doesn't care what you call him as long as he gets his money. I know. Biden is his retirement fund. Helter says the embarrassing part of the clapping of the audience after Biden flubbed his lines, NATO was a clown show. And Tuck says he only watched a few clips of the latest unclothed emperor parade. The message I got was keep stacking. Yeah, keep stacking. It's. I mean, this is what we got. This is what we got. They can't necessarily kick him out, although there are DNC contributors that are starting to back up because they're getting concerned that they're just wasting their money. They don't want to keep sinking money into Biden, although he seems to have unlimited funding because the ads from the Biden campaign are everywhere. Everywhere you look, everywhere you listen, there's ads from the Biden campaign. And they're pushing a lot about Agenda 2025 or whatever, which if you read into it, of course, Trump has nothing to do with and has already publicly denounced it. It's like, yeah, okay, I know who they are, and I have read it, and there's some things that make sense and some things that seem kind of ridiculous, but I don't endorse that. I don't have anything to do with that. But the average person is not going to do any research. They believe the first thing they hear if it suits them, and they latch onto it. Fluke Man says if it wasn't for people who know how to do their jobs effectively in the military, DOD, CIA, and other departments, Russia, China, and North Korea could have invaded the U.S. or allies would be powerless to do anything. And Dragon says maybe it wasn't a gaffe, maybe it was foreshadowing, a Freudian slip. Oh, yeah? Did he accidentally prophesy about who would be in charge of the Ukraine? Russia doesn't really want the Ukraine. I don't think so. They just wanted that one piece that wanted to annex anyways. And this could have been over like more than a year ago. Could have been over more than a year ago. But, it's not going to end as long as money's going to keep getting funneled in there. Zelensky spends more time in America and up before EU councils in Europe, Eastern Europe, or Western Europe rather, than he does in his own country, I swear. He's a greatest salesman on earth. Greatest salesman on earth. But overall, like I said, the whole conference wasn't too bad. The press conference wasn't too bad, keeping in mind, though, of course, that it was a setup. I'm sure it was prearranged questions. They did everything to make everything look as well as it could. I've also been reading reports this morning from radio stations, by the way, that are complaining that the White House was trying to force them to do certain edits in certain areas. Certain things that he said or certain phrases that he used, they wanted cut when it was rebroadcast on the radio. So that's been floating around too, trying to intimidate radio stations and radio networks into altering the audio. Doesn't surprise me either, because again, I mean, that's their job. It's just like this whole thing, and you're not hearing about it either. Jean-Pierre, you know, the press secretary, has had to admit that she's been lying about his health, lying about doctors coming to see him and so on, neurologists, and that's not being called out or even questioned. Granted, it's her job to make him look good, but now she's admitted that she's been making stuff up, and nobody's calling her. Nobody's calling her on it. No one in the press corps saying, "Excuse me, how come you lied about this and this? How long have you been lying about this and this?" Those questions aren't coming up. It's not happening. It's not happening because they don't want to lose their ability to come to the White House press conferences. So they allow for that to slip by. Now, pet peeve of mine, we're going to be talking about public school here really quick. Tampa Free Press. State of New York lets teachers union off the hook for failing public schools. You'll love this. New York Governor Kathy Hochul recently repealed a key law that required schools to consider overall student performance when evaluating teachers, making a significant win for teachers' unions in the state. The new legislation introduced by the New York State Unified Teachers repeals prior legislation signed by former Governor Andrew Cuomo, which held teachers accountable by mandating their employment be contingent on their performance. Under the now repealed law, districts were able to remove tenured teachers who received 2 consecutive ineffective ratings, and teachers that received 3 were automatically removed. In the 2022-2023 school year, only 48% of New York students in grades 3 through 8 scored a proficient in English language arts. That much? While only 52% scored proficient in math, according to New York Education Trust. Continued poor performance in previous years prompted the New York State Education Department to lower testing standards for the 2022-2023 school year, dropping the proficiency requirement from 65 to 53 for 8th grade math and 65 to 61 for 8th grade English language. This is fascinating to me. So you've they've already dropped the standards. 65 is a D. For those of you who are keeping track of percentages, a 65, who's old enough to remember getting the A, B, C, D, F, and I on your report cards, I being incomplete? 65 is a D. That's a solid D, okay? Because that's middle of the road. Less than 65 would be a D minus. More than 65 would be a D plus. So 65 is a solid D. 53 is a failing grade. That's an F. All right. 65% for math, again, is a D, and then 61 would be a D minus. So you already were grading at the lowest possible, and you lowered your math to a failing grade acceptability at roughly at 53%. All right. In order to try to make it look like these kids will pass. They'll technically pass, but make it look like they're not total failures. All right. That's what you're trying to do. Tucks the fourth estate is the fifth column. Okay. That's what you're trying to do here. And to try, in an effort to try to do something about this, Cuomo passed legislation that, okay, you know what? Let's try holding teachers accountable and see if that helps. It won't, but it helps. Okay? It might help. Maybe they'll be more invested in doing the job, because it's bad enough when you get students who don't care and don't want to learn anything anyway. It's worse when you got teachers that don't care and don't want to teach anything. So, like, go on, be a bunch of morons. I don't care. They don't even try. They don't even try anyways. So at least do the job is where Cuomo was coming from. Now that's gone. That's gone again. Hochul removed it so that now the teachers are again no longer accountable for their poor performance or the failing grades of the students, which are loosely connected, because you can give a poor performance and have a stellar student if the student is motivated to learn, which they are not. They are not. They know they don't have to bother. They know they don't care. And Helter says the IQ of the country will continue to slip as these schools continue to pass the students. And Donna says they remember the grading scale. Yeah. And they're on a grouping scale anyway. So if you have 5 kids in the classroom that score 100, and then you have 5 kids in the classroom that score 50, then they'll lump it together and call it an overall 75% or a solid C. You see, that's how that works. So they already lump it all together. Also, and this is one that a lot of people don't realize, I don't know if they do this in every state. So actually, if Cruising was in here, they might could tell us, because Cruising, who watches sometimes, works in the public school system. If you have a student who is in private school or a homeschooled student that receives assistance from public school, because you can opt into something like that, they'll count your kids' grades with their system, which is cheating, because they don't actually go to public school and they don't receive direct public school services. Moki is here. Glad you could make it. Dragon says the schools just want to look good. They don't care if the students get dumber. They want it. It's not so much a matter of wanting to look good as just wanting to keep that money flowing. They've got to keep the money flowing. As I've pointed out before, the public school system is like the biggest money pit in this country. Biggest money pit in the country is the public school system, in my opinion. The biggest amount of money spent in the United States is Social Security at a 1.5 trillion a year. Yeah, Brian says they're there to collect paychecks. And Moki wants to see a cat. Maybe later. Miss Kitty is sleeping in the chair behind me, and Granny Smith's in the corner. I don't want to just snatch her up right now. Then, that's followed by the national debt, which is the second biggest thing we pay, at close to $900 million a year in interest payments on the national debt. Not paying the debt off, just interest payments. Followed by, collectively, public school and then national defense. And it's not all federal dollars I'm talking as far as public school. That's why I say collectively, because it's the state money pooled together with the federal money that makes it that high. That they're like literally the third largest thing that we spend money on, tax money, and it's the biggest failure system in the government. It's pathetic. And these guys are getting a pass now. They're getting a pass now. Under the new law, teachers' unions will be able to collectively bargain over performance reviews, preventing ineffective teachers from facing any consequences, according to the WSJ. It goes on to say here. New York spends almost twice the national average on education at $29,873 per pupil, according to the Census Bureau. And you can find those statistics on the census, how much each state, how much federal, and I think that's just federal funding, not counting state, county, whatever. I think that's just the federal funding. Nearly $30,000 per student. But if you had a kid in private school for 15,000, they'd be 5 times as intelligent. But yeah, you can look those statistics up on the Census Bureau. So yeah, once again, Teachers Union gets all the cards. Gets all the cards. And Cyberjack Sr. has joined us. Glad you made it today. Tuck says when they were in school, they tried to push you into the magnet program. That was a scam. They wanted smart kids to be bused to low-performing schools to bring up the averages. There you go. Because there's no true magnet schools in the United States. I hate when they do that, when they call it a magnet school. There's one in Topeka, Kansas. It's not a magnet school. A magnet school focuses on one function. And you see these in Asia, okay? You got a kid who's a really good writer. You put him in a magnet school that emphasizes language. You got a kid who's really good at math. You put him in a magnet school where almost all the classes are focused on math. That's a true magnet school. Jane says they heard of the state of Florida. If you want to homeschool kids, must do the program, but get $10,000 a year to do it. And Tuck says they almost fell for it, but couldn't rationalize being bused an hour one way when I could see a high school from my mailbox. I wouldn't have done it either. That's too much. That's like the old forced busing program that I had to go through. That's like the that program that I had to deal with growing up. But, you know, while we're on the subject of public school, the government has been exposed. More whistleblower time, ladies and gentlemen, whistleblower time. Going to the Washington Examiner, Department of Defense, K through 12 schools pushed DEI and activism on their children, according to a new report that's been released. There's the Pentagon in the picture. Department of Defense K-12 school system pushed diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology and encouraged children to become activists, according to a new report. Basically, trained students to shoot the country in the foot. You train kids to be activists and then expect them to be patriotic too. It doesn't work. The Open the Books report, published Thursday, and Open the Books is the name of the organization, said the Department of Defense Education Activity, or DODEA, which operates schools globally for the children of American military members, pursued DEI-infused social and emotional learning programs, or SELs, as well as encouraged students to become political activists. That's very contradictory. The report comes as the National Defense Authorization Act is expected to be weighed by the Senate this month. According to the 54 page report, the DODEA used transformative SEL techniques, which refers to applying the SEL framework towards the goal of creating equitable settings and systems and promoting justice-oriented schools and civic engagement, according to leading SEL group CASEL. Transformative SEL works by telling children to pay outside attention, to, quote, privilege and identity. And according to a 2021 Equity and Access Summit from the DODEA, students being confronted by those issues face difficult conversations that can provoke children to tears, to cry. The DODEA, so that's straight up bullying by the teachers. The DODEA highlighted the difficult conversations and the SEL connection to the DEI on its now defunct DEI division website. While the DODEA dissolved its DEI division in the wake of controversy surrounding its former chief, Calissa Wing, who had written anti-white messages on social media, the DODEA still maintains a DEI steering committee representing an ideology that former DODEA Executive Director Thomas Brady said would be embedded into everything we do. That's great. That is great. Oh, Jane says, "What so much crazy stuff in mixing up the youth's brains? The human brain is not fully developed until 25." That's correct. 24 to 25 years old before the brain stops growing physically. And Cyberjack says, "Brag about his greatness and blames everyone else." You're talking about Biden? You got to be talking about Biden. And Sven says, "Who TF do they think these kids' parents are?" Soldiers, Marines, Navy personnel, Air Force personnel. That's who their parents are. And that's a direct contradiction. That is a direct contradiction to what their parents do for a living, to force this on them. And to force it on them so hard, as was pointed out in that article, that they bring these kids to tears. That's brainwashing. That's social programming. Can't you just teach the kids? I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired of this. It's bad enough it's happening in public school. It's happening on military bases globally. American military bases across the globe. Ooh, Jane says, "My grown daughter lives in Florida, and children are told in grade school they can be whatever they want. One school let a kid act like a cat and put huge kitty litter box in the bathroom to pee in." I've heard of stuff like that happening. I'm not sure about the litter box, but I've heard of them allowing kids to be cats. And I'm sure many of you have seen, it was a viral TikTok video from a substitute teacher complaining about being discharged because she would not acknowledge a student. I think it was a second or third grader. Am I correct? That would only respond to mewing because she was a kitty. She was like, "No, we're not doing that today." And, kids imagine things, kids pretend things, but you know when to stop and when to shut it down, or you should. We used to know that. Hell, even Mr. Rogers talked about it all the time. That's why the neighborhood of make-believe was on the other side of the trolley. And it was called neighborhood of make-believe for a reason. We're going to go pretend, but you know what? When we're done, and we're going to get back to normal life afterwards, because it's okay to pretend, but you can't stay there all the time. Now, apparently, you can. Now, apparently, you can. Screwing these kids up. And deep down inside, they know they're not really a kitty or a girl or a boy or a puppy or whatever the hell they're pretending. They know it's pretend. And they grow up and they stay with that facade, and it makes them more and more depressed. And they end up hurting themselves or someone else because of that depression. It eats them up inside. And that's also why a lot of times people, especially in the so-called trans community, lash out. "You have to accept me. You have to accept me." Why? Because they don't really accept themselves. Maybe if I can force you to accept me, strength in numbers, it'll lend credibility to what I'm imagining. It doesn't. That's why so many of them commit suicide. Fluke Man says, "Kids in China get pushed so ridiculous that their skills are at Western adult level, which makes them cry." At least they're learning something. Sven says, "The health department should be called as soon as it is demanded. It is an open sewer." And Tuck says, "His kitten pretends his hand is an evil crab. My hand is not a crab, and even my kitten knows this." Yeah, the cat knows you're playing, but the children don't. So somebody mentioned China, so we're going to head to that corner of the world, only we're going as far as South Korea. You get a kick out of this one. Interesting Engineering has this article. South Korea engine-burning lasers to zap North Korea's drones. And here we see in the image, if you see this, stationary laser shooting down a drone. Yes, that can happen. We're at that level where you can shoot drones down. I guess North Korea has a lot of spy drones over South Korea or at the DMZ and now North Korea because they continue to escalate. Remember, there was another round of balloon attacks. There's people saber rattling by cutting through the DMZ soldiers from North Korea. There's the music and propaganda being blasted on the speakers again in South Korea. We're doing all this again. Now we're going to start shooting down drones. South Korea's Defense Acquisition Program Administration, or DAPA, not DARPA, DAPA, announced on Thursday that it will become the first country in the world to deploy anti-drone laser weapons. The laser system, dubbed the Star Wars Project, yes, that's what it says, will counter North Korean drone incursions into its airspace. They can't call it that. Reagan coined that. Remember, he was going to call his missile satellite defense system Star Wars, and George Lucas got pissed off. That's going way back. Once active, the strategy deployed by Hanwha Aerospace will cost around $1.45 per shot. In a move called game-changing, I'm so sick of hearing the phrase game-changing. Anyone else tired of hearing that? Game-changing, broke the internet, stuff like that. I'm sick of hearing it. The new defense system will be silent and deadly for enemy drones. Well, if it's a machine, is it really deadly? Hanwha, a subsidiary of Hanwha Group, is an aerospace industrial company headquartered in Changwon, South Korea. It was established in 1977. Our country is becoming the first country in the world to deploy and operate laser weapons that you know of, and our military's response capabilities on North Korea's drone provocation will be further strengthened, DAPA said, calling those weapons a game changer in the future battlefield. That is hilarious. That is hilarious. So this is what it's come to now, using lasers to shoot down drones. Shoot down. Hey, maybe they can use those at the airports too. They'll take your drone down at the airport. You know that, right? They usually, they have trained Falcons in a lot of airports that will, if you fly a drone over that airspace, they'll send the Falcon and the Falcon will tear it down. So I catch up a couple of comments here. Dragon says, we shall call it the Alan Parsons Project. Yeah, it's Preparation H. Preparations A through G failed, but Preparation H felt good on the whole. Quoting Austin Powers III there. Jane says, what the hell? I heard about drones shooting lasers in Hawaii last year. Is this to start fires or experiment with weather? There's a lot of conspiracy theories about that without getting too deep into it. I know people say that they believe laser weapons were used to start the fires. You don't really need to. You can have an operative on the ground start a fire anywhere. It's a lot easier. If it was started, can't say that it was for sure because I'll get in trouble. But you know how it is. And Jane says, my girlfriend in Chicago has her older boyfriend, 60 plus years, is part of a drone club, fly around the park there. And Sven doesn't like George Lucas, a game-changing bitch, but one nonetheless. Well, Lucas sued everybody. Lucas was up to his eyeballs in lawsuits when the Star Wars came out. He sued the people that put out Battlestar Galactica, even though that story was from before Star Wars. He sued Quark. Who remembers the TV show Quark? Anything that resembled anything from Star Wars, he tried to sue them back in the day. And Jane says, Falcon the bird. Yes, the birds. Falcons. They or hawks. Excuse me, hawks. Falcons are in Europe. They use hawks to bring them down. Trained hawks. Helta says maybe we'll get to see some X-wings and Millennium Falcons soon. I don't know about that. But I just thought this was interesting that they're using laser weapons now to shoot down the drones. Shooting down the drones, and that, you know, that's just a step. If they can get that system working really well, the next step is shooting down larger objects with a laser. Faster or larger objects. Faster or larger objects. As we shift around here, this is more local news, but you know I love talking about government corruption, and this one will knock your socks off. This is a local Atlanta TV station I'm about to pull up an article from, WXIA TV Atlanta. Big time government corruption. Although it's on the local level, I have to imagine this is happening in a lot of places. Fulton County Housing Authority is put on notice and at risk of losing its funding. It goes deeper than this. This is a 17-hour-old article at the time that I copied it. And there's one of their headquarters. They have several buildings, Housing Authority of Fulton County, Georgia. I've found some more information on this that might not be in this article, but getting into the reading here. There are growing concerns about what is happening within the Housing Authority of Fulton County regarding its leadership, staffing, and financing a program that helps provide housing to more than 10,000 people in Fulton County. However, the agency and its Housing Choice Voucher Program, formerly known as Section 8, a lot of you are familiar with what Section 8 vouchers are. Usually you get those from HUD or HND, Housing and Neighborhood Development. And it pays part of your rent, or all of your rent sometimes if you're like a welfare recipient, stuff like this. Okay. Under fire, Fulton County Board of Commissioners Vice Chair Khadija Abdur Rahman said the board didn't just learn about this. Okay. Let's be crystal clear about this. I sounded the alarm on Fulton County Housing Authority over a year ago, she explained. That's a woman? Okay. I don't know who Abdur Rahman is. Vice Chair Abdur Rahman said the board must take action. We're at where the rubber meets the road. In a scathing letter from HUD sent to HAFC Interim Executive Director Dr. Rosalind Harper, it states a number of deficiencies their team found during an on-site review on June 26th. Okay. I don't know if it says what the complaints are in here, but I do know what the complaints are. No, it doesn't tell you in this article, so I'm just going to follow it up myself. Because more was revealed this morning about what's going on there. Okay. Sven says he should have sued his mom for raising yeah, okay. Still talking about George Lucas there. Jane says corruption is everywhere. Sad to say, yes, it is. The accusations, because they've been shut down, and I think like 7 out of 10 of their board have resigned. They've walked away from this, like in the last couple of days, something like this. Tuck says Section 8, the great savior, waiting list 36 plus months. Some wait twice that, some pass away waiting, which is what led to what's going on here. The accusations are, of course, mismanagement, as well as misappropriation of funds and the coercion of clients. And when I say coercion of clients, I'm saying something like in terms of, oh, that waiting list too long for you. I got your waiting list right here, baby. Maybe we can hook something up under the desk and I'll move you up a little bit, kind of stuff. A lot of sexual favors being traded for Section 8 vouchers, and that's what opened up the investigation. Apparently, prostitution basically for Section 8 vouchers and getting deals on rent, sexual misconduct, sexual abuse of clients, misappropriation of funds. Like I said, I believe it was 10 or 12 people on the committee, and there's 3 left because everyone else suddenly decided they wanted to resign when when this popped up, and the Fulton County's government says that they can't handle it. They don't know what to do. And they've actually asked now the federal government to come in, shut their housing authority down, and retool it from scratch. They don't think they can handle it in-house because it's branching in too many directions. Dragon says in Minnesota, HUD isn't doing its job. They're letting a management company and nonprofit landlords get away with not doing recertifications for 3 years. The tenants have outstanding balances. Tuck says can't be fired if you quit or retire. No, but you can still be charged. You can still be charged if anybody's willing to actually come forward. And I'm like, wow, how did that start? How did that start? How deep does this run? How long has that been going on? Because I'm sure at some point it was somebody who went in there and said, what do you mean I got to wait 3 or 4 years? I got to wait 3 or 4 years for a voucher. Hey, maybe I'll lock this door real quick and you can help me out on this voucher program thing. And then the bulb went on and he's like, hey, this could be a great gig. I can get a hookup every day. And then, of course, that leads to the stealing money or whatever the hell else they were doing. Well, accusations are flying left and right now. And like I said, the Fulton County's city government, they're like, oh God, we can't clean this up. And they asked for the feds. And Tuck says the feds will fix it for sure. Yeah. Sure they will. Well, maybe they will because they won't be staying. They won't be staying, and they'd love to embarrass a state government for not doing its job, I'm sure. And by the feds, of course, HUD, the federal branch, I'm pretty sure is who that will involve. But isn't that crazy? Speaking of corruption, so it's like, how deep is that? Was there anyone on staff that was honest at this point? The whole staff of Fulton County is being looked at? All of them? Not just the committee. How deep does this go? How much money has been stolen? How many people have been taken advantage of or coerced into a sexual situation? Yep, I give you government, ladies and gentlemen. I give you government. And speaking of corrupt government in Georgia, this caught my attention because we've talked about Fani Willis a bunch. Of course, she is the prosecutor who is overseeing Trump's Georgia collusion case. Newsweek article, Fani Willis sees a massive spike in campaign donations. Really interesting. I think this is very interesting, actually. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, I assume it's pronounced Fani, because a lot of people say Fanny, I don't know, is experiencing a massive spike in campaign donations that helped her more than double her entire war chest and pushed her campaign past the $1 million threshold. Willis's re-election campaign had a fantastic start to the summer, according to campaign finance disclosure reports. The last filing submitted to the state on Wednesday showed that the district attorney saw her biggest fundraising haul yet, raking in $783,929 between May and July. That pushes her total contributions to over $1,333,600. Previously, her highest reporting period has been between February and May, during which her campaign received $226,942 in donations. I'd like to know where that money came from. Anyone else curious? She's running for district attorney. Okay? She has one person running against her who will probably lose. Tuck, commenting on the previous article, says the entire staff should be examined to see who knew, who participated, and who didn't know. Yeah, you would think so. But yet they should all be looked at because there's a lot of weird stuff that apparently that was going on there. I want to know how it is that she's the one that's also prosecuting Young Thug. So she's hanging on all these big profile cases, Fawny, and she gets a lot of support from the black mega churches in the Atlanta area, undeserved and very unchristian like on the part of these churches. I would never set foot in any of these churches based on their support of her. Getting up there and saying that God sent her, that she represents Jesus. Some of you remember when I read the article, those are quotes like about a month ago when the black megachurches, 13 of them, were promoting her. And it's like, this woman is a fornicator. Okay. She was having an affair with a married man. She lied under oath. She is suspected of misappropriating funds. It just hasn't been fully examined yet. But you're going to support her. You're going to support her. Helter says, once you put money in a campaign, you can't take it back without legal reasons. You can't just take money out like an ATM. There would definitely be a record of getting money from a campaign. Yeah. And Sven says, disgusting wolf in sheep's clothing pastors. They are. I was appalled. But, unfortunately, the majority, I can't say all because I don't know for sure, but majority mega wealthy black Atlanta churches appear to be very corrupt. They appear to be very corrupt and very political. And Dragon says, Fawny's the only one who really knows about the money, and we will never get a straight answer other than a filler-busting word salad response. Yeah. And then she threw dude under the bus. My favorite part, actually, was talking about when they were questioning her about the man she was having the affair with. And she said that she would not, excuse me, that she would not throw a black man under the bus, but, and then went on to insult his performance, shall we say, and I don't mean as an attorney, in open court. So you're not going to insult a black man, but then you'll talk about how bad he was in bed in front of the world because you're being filmed, you're in the news. There's just no respect. No respect. You're the one that slept with him. You're the one that was having an affair in front of everybody. The whole staff knew. The whole staff knew. They were all aware of it. Very corrupt. Very corrupt. And of course, while we're on the subject, again, I really want to know, I would love to know who those donations came from. I'm sure there's a public record somewhere. And what's being done with that money, really? Because I haven't seen one ad from her. So what's happening with that campaign funding? What's happening with that campaign funding? If you're smart with it, you can spend it. No one will ever know, because there is a federal tracking on campaign contributions for political purposes. So if you're a politician of any type, including a district attorney, and you receive campaign funding, there is a tracking service to maintain how it's spent. However, there is a loophole. It does not always catch purchases that are under $600. Did you know that? Oh my God. Cyberjack says anything you say before the word but is a lie. Probably after it too. Poor guy. Although he's laughing all the way to the bank, rumor has it, I don't think it's been tallied yet, but when we looked at the salary for this guy, I believe it was up to 1.6 million that he had been paid from the district attorney's office. 1.6 million. 1.6 million, and he had only gone out twice. That's great. He'd only gone out twice. But while we're on the subject of corruption, this guy's name just keeps coming up this week. And we're going to go to an article from Inc. INC. This Bill Gates-backed startup, here's another one, making butter from CO2 instead of cows. There you go. Artificial butter, folks, courtesy of the Bill Gates Foundation. He just keeps coming up. He's tied into that ruminate. He's tied in to that. We talked about ruminate yesterday. He's tied into that apeel, that toxic coating that they're putting on fruits and vegetables now. Don't buy anything at the supermarket that says apeel on it. Okay, please don't. And John Boy has joined us. Glad you could make it today, John Boy. He says he's late. That's okay. We're talking about Bill Gates again and more of his food, if you want to call it that. All right. We already have artificial butter. Before I even get into this article, it's called margarine. Margarine is made primarily of vegetable shortenings. Sometimes if you have spreadable butter instead of stick butter, it's butter it's a combination of real butter and vegetable oil. Or if you just buy straight up margarine, it's essentially vegetable oil. We don't need a butter alternative. We already have one if you want to eat it. I don't recommend eating margarine. I recommend sticking with real butter, but to each their own. And Tuck says margarine is bad for you. Here, have some fake butter. Yeah, exactly. This is what it says. And remember, he's tied into apeel. He's tied into ruminate. He's tied into the Evo milk, that milk that's made from soldier fly maggots. All this disgusting alternatives that I'm sure he does not eat. So the article reads, and this is from Inc. or Illustration Incorporated is the name of the news service that put this up. Dairy is one of life's great pleasures. Science even says so. But the cows that make butter also produce a tremendous amount of methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Now a Bill Gates-backed startup is developing, quote, butter without the environmental footprint. Thank you, Bill. And we talked about this yesterday with the ruminate, because ruminate is actually for those of you who did not see or weren't joining us yesterday, ruminate is a drug that they're starting to give to cattle to prevent them from basically farting. Okay. It's and the reason that they produce so much methane is because of their diet. Industrial farms feed them food that they're not designed to digest. It's primarily a corn-based diet and often rehashed with their own manure. They mixed manure back into their feed. Look it up. I'm not kidding. Instead of just letting them eat grass. Because they're bovines, they're herbivores. This is what they're designed to do, is eat freaking grass. No. Feed them corn because it'll fatten them up and it's cheap. And they have a lot of gas now, so let's give them an injection. So what if it contaminates the meat? Now back to the article. San Jose, California-based startup Savior uses a thermochemical process to create a fatty-rich spread that is similar to butter, using just carbon dioxide, heat, hydrogen, and oxygen. The company, oh my God, the company pulls CO2 from the air and hydrogen from water, heats and oxidizes them to form a type of fat. The creation is earning a lot of attention, especially from Bill Gates, a self-identified animal fat aficionado. Is he? In a blog post that reads like a love letter to the greasy, oily sizzle that makes cheeseburgers so tasty, the billionaire co-founder of Microsoft described why his VC firm Breakthrough Energy Ventures invested in Savior. The process doesn't release any greenhouse gases, and it uses no farmland and less than 1,000th of the water that traditional agriculture does. And most important, it tastes really good, like the real thing, because chemically it is, he wrote. Okay. According to UC Davis, cattle are the biggest agricultural source of greenhouse gases and account for about 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I want to stop you right there real quick. They say, I'm going to read this again. According to UC Davis, cattle are the biggest agricultural source of greenhouse gases and account for 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the article we read yesterday said that they accounted for 40%. Every time I read one of these articles and they quote greenhouse gas emissions from cattle, every source gives a different damn number. Translation, they don't freaking know. They don't know. But they're going to force you to eat like laboratory grown butter. Laboratory grown butter. Let me catch up. I'm like way behind here now on the comments. Nature Nerd says disgusting Bill Gates pesticides and margarines causes heart attacks and is highly processed. Helter says this is another tech startup reinventing something that already exists. Yes. There is a reason coal butter is not as common as it was back in World War II, because it's disgusting. And Nature, you know what that makes me think of? Blackadder the Fourth. And they were he's complaining about the coffee. He was like, oh, this coffee is horrible. And then Baldrick says, well, you know, it's not really coffee. We ran out of coffee 6 months ago. And he was like, well, what are we drinking? Well, it's mud. And then he says, well, at least we have sugar. And he says, it's not exactly sugar either. We ran out of sugar 4 months ago. And then he was like, well, what is it? And he says, it's dandruff. And then Baldrick volunteered, we don't have cream either. We ran out of cream 3 months ago. And then Blackadder says, I do not want to know where it came from. Anyways, Nature Nerd says animals are good for the earth, but now the greenies want to kill animals. I know it. And Dragon says, I wouldn't be surprised if Bill Gates filmed himself eating this fake butter concoction to fool people into thinking he's a supporter. He could eat something that looked like it. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. Who remembers like a couple of years back during the C virus pandemic when the Prime Minister of England was getting his vaccination? And I blew up the picture and showed that the cap was still on the syringe. He never took the shot. He faked it. Man, I got in trouble for that image. And Prime Mover says, how about ghee butter? And Cyberjack says, Bill is just as evil and wrong. Yeah, he's a Bond villain, I'm telling you. And Fluke Man says, used to think Gates was a geek, but turns out he's a mad scientist like Dr. Frankenstein. It's alive, it's alive. Yeah, I know. At least Dr. Frankenstein in the story realized his mistake. He realized his mistake, he walked it back. As a Frankenstein in the original story was actually highly intelligent. The creature was a genius and could speak and demanded that he make a bride, or else he would stalk Frankenstein and kill all of his family. And so he built the bride, but then after he built the bride, he couldn't take it anymore, and he butchered her. He killed her, and then that's when all hell broke loose in the story. But at least Dr. Frankenstein realized the error of his ways. Bill never will. Bill never will. But with that, I will go ahead and start signing off again. And Moki, are you still there? Again, you are listening to and/or watching Coffee Talk, and you can find the live portion Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Coffee Talk and Prepper University, at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University. I was wondering if Moki was still here, if you wanted to see Granny Smith, if she'll let me pick her up. Because they asked about a cat earlier, I almost forgot. You can find me on X at Coffee Talk Chat and fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta, Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. Come here, sweetie. All right, everybody. Real quickly here. I'm over time anyway. Granny Smith. Granny Smith, everybody. She's a sweetheart. She really is. Living the good life now. I don't think I'm going to adopt this one. I think we're going to have to keep Granny Smith. She's got a really interesting story. But with that, I'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you, everybody who was able to join us here today. Hope you got something